Good morning, everyone. I'm Russell Rucker. I'm here for another constitutional talk. And today I'd like to get back into our amendments and discuss our 11th Amendment. And the 11th is really a unique amendment because of the way we got the amendment. Unlike the Bill of Rights, it wasn't just a planned proposal from Congress. It came to us as a reaction from a Supreme Court case. But let's start with the amendment itself. And it states, 11th Amendment, the judicial powers of the United States shall not be construed to extend to any suit in law or equity commenced or prosecuted against one of the United States by citizens of another state or by citizens or subjects of any foreign state. So in essence, what they're saying here is one state cannot sue another, the citizens of a state cannot sue another, and a foreign entity, like say the government of France or England, cannot sue the United States in federal court. So where does this all come from? Well, there was a Supreme Court case called Chisholm versus Georgia. Now, this goes way back into the Jay Court, which is our first court. John Jay had helped write the Federalist Papers with Hamilton and Madison, and he was on the court with four other people. Now, in this case, Erdl was the only one that dissented from the decision. See, basically what we have here is a man by the name of Robert Farquhar. And he purchased goods. He was a dealer from South Carolina, a merchant. And he purchased purchased and delivered roughly just under $175,000 worth of goods for use during the Revolutionary War. And this was delivered over to Georgia, and Georgia owed this sum of money. Unfortunately, Georgia never paid their debt. And so after his death, after Farquhar's death, Chisholm, who was another merchant from South Carolina, was his executor of his estate, and he sued Georgia for $500,000 to settle the debt in the will. Okay, and Georgia just never sent anybody to defend itself. So they wound up going to the Supreme Court, and Georgia wasn't there defending itself, and they had a 4-1 decision in favor of Chisholm to pay this $500,000. Now, all would have been fine and good, but Georgia just wasn't going to pay that money. And the states were really up in arms because they didn't want to be sued from a citizen of another state. They didn't think that that's where the Supreme Court should have their power. They shouldn't have first jurisdiction over a case like this. So they passed an amendment, which became the 11th Amendment, to kind of overturn the situation and not ever allow again a citizen of one state to sue that of another. And that's really what this comes down to. But it also goes further and doesn't allow a foreign entity, say France or Mexico or someone of that nature, to sue in federal court the United States. This is really a good example of how to deal with a situation where most people don't agree that the Supreme Court is right. You don't harass them. You don't push them around. You sent up an amendment, you sent it to the states, you change the ruling through the amendment system. And this really is the best way to deal with a rogue court. Now, when you get back to the 1790s, there are no majority opinions. There are no concurring opinions. Everyone wrote their own opinion. So when you have 5 members of the court, in this case, you get 5 opinions. But only one dissented, and that was Mr. Ertl. John Jay was the Chief Justice of the court, and the ruling went with the majority. A 4-1 is a pretty good decision, a pretty good numbered decision. But the states were having problems with funding anyway, and they probably didn't have the funds to pay up. But this is just a good example of how a state just ignored it the best they could, and they sent no one to defend themselves. And when you choose not to defend yourself in court, a non-defense is just more than likely going to be ruled against you. So here we have a state that didn't defend themselves, and yet the Congress and the Senate defended them by setting down a new amendment. Just want you to think about the process involved here more than anything to get to the 11th Amendment. These amendments are all important because they dealt with a specific problem. Here we have a state that did not believe that the Supreme Court had any authority, so they ignored the Supreme Court. And they paid dearly for not respecting the authority of the court. Before Marbury versus Madison, there was no judicial review like we have today, where you have a bill going up before it, they're deciding whether it's constitutional or not. But prior to Marbury versus Madison, which came just a very short few years after this, there was no judicial review. We're so used to it today that almost everything gets judicial review on one way or another. As we work up through courts, many times our lawsuits start in our lower federal or appellate courts, or sometimes even state courts, and they work their way up through the system. But in 1794, 1795, you did not have judicial review, which is one of the reasons that Madison and Jefferson wrote up the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions. I believe I mentioned them earlier, because they were trying to find another way to get around things that were clearly unconstitutional, and that's where the theory of nullification comes in. And I do believe I mentioned that one other time, but maybe we'll have to get back into the idea of nullification later. But for now, just think about the 11th and why and how to deal with a court that you may not agree with. And one of the big ways is to pass an amendment to deal with the decision that you think was wrongly decided. With that, you have a good day, and I'll see you next time on the next Constitution Talk. Please subscribe to my videos. I greatly appreciate it, just so you don't miss any of our important content here. Thank you and have a good day. Bye now.